Hey guys, this is Steli after with Closeout. In this video, I'm going to describe to you why size matters in B2B. So I was talking to a founder today and he was asking me about his brand new business selling to other businesses. And his specific question was actually, what kind of business should we sell to first? Should we go right to the enterprise or should we go down to the prosumers? What's the right size when we just get started selling our solutions to other businesses? It's an excellent question. So let's first examine all the different options that you have, the risk and the rewards, and then I'll give you a recommendation to get started with. So number one, obviously at the top of the pyramid are the enterprise customers, right? The Fortune 500, the biggest of the biggest organizations you could ever think of selling to. What are the rewards if you actually succeed selling to enterprise clients and customers? They're obvious. First and foremost, money, right? They have a lot of money, they have deep pockets, and they don't care about spending really, really large and crazy amounts of money to solve difficult and important problems to them. That's probably one of the biggest rewards. If you actually land a big enterprise client, it can mean hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars to your business. The other benefit is that you add logos, right? Things that you can put on your website that will have a broad appeal. Lots and lots of people will recognize that brand and will decide, holy shit, if it's good enough for this company, it's good enough for us. And will end up buying from you, or at least giving you a lot more credibility, a lot more trust, right? Besides money and logos, what are other benefits from enterprise clients and customers? Well, you know, they're sophisticated buyers that typically tend to spend, even more money for getting the solution integrated, for getting consulting, for getting support and service. They're just really sophisticated buyers that are willing to spend money for good solutions, and they'll have sometimes even realistic timelines. But like the money and the logo part are really the top things that you're looking for. What are the risks? The most obvious one, it's really fucking difficult to sell to them. It takes way longer than you usually are comfortable with when you're just getting started. So sales cycles can be really long, 9 months, 12 months, sometimes even longer than a year. To close a client, you'll have to have a lot of industry connections usually. You need to know how to play the game. You need to understand how to sell to large organizations with multiple stakeholders where the sales process is pretty complex. So the amount of momentum you're going to be able to get and the amount of frequency of wins is going to be really low. So it takes a long time to get your first win and then build on top of that. If you don't have a ton of experience in enterprise sales, if you don't bring the chops, the network, the experience, the knowledge, the skills, it's going to be really deadly to even attempt selling to enterprise as you're first entering the B2B market. One level below the enterprise, you have the big SMBs, right? The small and medium-sized businesses. Let's focus on the MBs, the medium-sized businesses, right? We're talking about companies, there's no clear definition that everybody agrees on, but in my mind, we're talking about companies that do millions and millions in revenue, that maybe have thousands of employees, not quite Fortune 500, but really massive nonetheless, right? These companies obviously are kind of a small mini enterprise client version. They have all the benefits of an enterprise customer, just in smaller quantities. So, less revenue, a little less of a brand recognition when you actually win them. But also the risks are sometimes a bit smaller, right? So the sales cycles will still be long, but just a tiny bit shorter. The complexity of the sales still will be there, but a little bit less. They might be a bit more stingy with their money, so you might have to fight in different ways than you would have with the enterprise clients. But the good news about them is that there's a lot more of them out there, right? So enterprise clients, Fortune 500, limited by the number 500, just 500 companies on that pool. But when you look at medium-sized businesses, there are tens of thousands, millions of these businesses around the world, right? So a much larger pool. The problem with them is that a lot of times it's harder to define them. Because it's harder to define them, it's harder to find them. And that's really your core step number one if you want to succeed in selling anything, is you need to be able to actually find the person or the individual or the companies you're trying to sell to be able to get their attention, their time, and ultimately their money and their business, right? So medium-sized businesses, great a little bit of a smaller task and mountain to climb than Fortune 500 massive enterprise clients, but still pretty fucking hard. A level below that in the SMB is the SB, the small business. And in the small business, obviously, we're talking tens of million businesses around the world that are small businesses. That can go from the mom and pop shop to the outsourced development company and design shop to your local pizzeria. I can includes pretty much everything that's small. It typically is run by the owner. And usually we're not talking thousands of employees. We probably talk less than 100 employees when we talk small businesses. Maybe the average between 5 to 25. So small businesses are great because higher pool that you can approach. Obviously, they're small hierarchies, so less complex buying cycles, less decision makers, quicker decision making process, but also a lot less money to be made, a lot less recognizability in their logo. When you win their business, doesn't really mean that you can put their logo on your website and it's going to explode. But usually, if you do a really good job, you might have a really easy time to get references from these small businesses to other small businesses and grow kind of from the bottom up versus the top down. Small businesses also, we might want to divide. There's many ways to slice and dice those markets. You could look at them and say small local business versus small business, right? If you're a web design agency in Sydney, you might do business internationally versus if you're a coffee shop in Sydney, you can't do business, or you probably won't do business internationally. You're kind of focused and restrained and constrained by your location. Now, those constraints might be good or bad. Selling to local businesses that are small, obviously they typically are smaller in terms of revenue, and they have kind of local challenges in winning customer bases. So you can either solve their problem in a very unique way, but also you can address them, create, credibility with them just by being close in proximity, or just by having other customers that are close in proximity can make a big difference versus small businesses that work globally and internationally. Totally different set of challenges, problems, software, and solutions that they're buying. Totally different way to build credibility with them. The next kind of business that you can sell to are, or could be considered, the prosumers or professionals, right? Small businesses that are basically run by an individual bread maker. So we're talking doctors, we're talking lawyers, we're talking accountants, we're talking any kind of professional that is making enough money and that's kind of running their profession as a small business, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller. Sometimes it's just that individual, right? A freelancer, or somebody that is freelancing, or a single consultant. But we're talking about professionals. So professionals, the rewards if you're selling to them are that they are easier to identify and find. Because usually they put their information out there everywhere on the web. You go to Yelp, LinkedIn, all kinds of websites, Yellow Pages. You can find lots and lots of professionals. So you can find their contact information up to date, their phone number, their name, the business they're in, the location they're in, their email address. That's kind of gold, obviously, for the lead gen, for getting started and selling to them. But and they have money to spend, not as much as enterprise customers, obviously, not as much as medium-sized businesses, but they do have a few $100s that they can spend every single month, sometimes thousands of dollars over the year, for solutions and things that make their business better. Now, the thing that's not that great about professionals, selling to professionals, is that a lot of times they're making their money by actually offering their time. So, if you're a doctor, you're making money every time you see a patient, which means that most of the time you're actually seeing patients. So it's really hard to get their attention. A lot of times they use gatekeepers, people, secretaries, assistants, to actually build a wall between themselves and service providers that are trying to sell them something. So you'll need to find tactics to overcome that challenge. You'll need to find times and ways to get their attention when they're not actually seeing clients and patients and people that are paying them money to get their expertise. So you'll have to find workarounds. And then, most of these professionals are pretty stingy with their money. They run really, really small businesses. They need to be on a tight budget. They might be a little cynical on solutions and things that they've been sold to. So they're not as willing, as easy to get massive budgets from then larger customers, right? And larger buyers within those organizations. So professionals, amazing because you can find them, they have real problems, and there's some money to spend for it, but really, really tough because they don't have time to talk to you because they're losing money, they're not talking to clients, and they're sometimes a little burned out, a little cautious, and they use typically a wall between them and any kind of service provider out there. And the last but not least is hyper niches, super niches, things like selling to other startups, selling to very, very specific niches that are not defined necessarily by the market they're in or the thing they're doing, not even necessarily, but by the stage of their company, right? You're just about to get started and you're in hyper growth mode. You can be identified as a startup. So selling to startups, for instance, is a super niche that's kind of more about the face of the company than really what the company is doing or the size even of the company. Some startups are fairly large and still growing really aggressively. If you're focusing on a super or hyper niche, the benefits are that if you know that niche well, you can have an unfair competitive advantage. These niches usually have very loud echo chambers. So if you sell to a few of them successfully, they might tell others and they tell others, and kind of it's small circles. So one will start telling about your solution to another, and it starts creating buzz, which is awesome for you. And sometimes that buzz, if it's a very prominent niche, like startup companies around the world, will swap over to other verticals because that loud echo chamber, these customers will be early adopters, will be thought leaders, so they'll influence other companies out there that want to look for what they're doing to learn from. The risk obviously is that these super niches are very small, very limited, that you might create ways and features and things that these hyper niches need that will not translate well to the broader market, so it'll keep you limited in your ability to grow, and even sometimes keep you building things that nobody else wants, and they'll stop other companies from buying your solution. So you need to be cautious of those risks. Now, what's the final verdict? If you are a new business and you sell to other businesses, who should you start with, right? Sometimes it's obvious you build a solution with a specific size of company in mind, and only enterprise client could get value out of it, or only professionals could get value out of it. But a lot of times, B2B companies could grow kind of maybe not from the tiniest business to the largest one, but still have a pretty wide range on who they could sell to or who could get value out of their solution. So how do you get started? Well, you get started with what you know. First and foremost, look for markets you really understand well, you know well, so you have an unfair competitive advantage. Is it a market that you're operating in? Is it the type of business you are running yourself? Is it a market that you have a lot of experience in, a strong network, a brand, any kind of unfair competitive advantage, any knowledge you have and real insight will make a big difference. So start there. Now, what do you do when you don't have any of that? You start as small as you can to build as much momentum and as high frequency wins as possible. And as you build momentum and as you close more and more deals and you create more and more wins, what you're looking for are signals that you're ready to move upstream. What that means is typically, like let's take an example for Close.io, we're selling to startups, we're selling to smaller businesses, less than 100 employees, or even better, not 100 employees, we have companies with thousands of employees, but less than 100 users of our application, 100 salespeople or less, right? So we're selling to startups, which is a hyper niche. A lot of times we sell to companies that have less than 100 salespeople. But what happens magically and beautifully is that as we're winning more momentum in our market, as we create more and more value, as more and more people talk about us, naturally and organically, once in a while we see larger companies sign up for a product. And in the early days when we started having these larger companies sign up, we couldn't really service them. So we would see that our win rates there were really low. So we didn't focus on them. But as we grew our solution, our abilities, our product matured, we started winning some of these larger customers. And that's the natural signal you're looking for. Once you start closing some really unnaturally bigger companies than your typical average customer base, that means that the bigger market is starting to get ready. And once you get that organic signal, you want to start actually marketing more to that audience. You want to start going after that audience a lot broader because the market has shown you that these companies are showing an increased interest in your solution. And when they check out your solution, sometimes they even find that it fits their needs. That's all you need to start attacking that audience and move upstream to bigger and bigger customers. But you want to start with organic signaling versus seeing that these larger customers don't seem to find any interest in your solution or any success, and you still go after them, right? Prematurely. So go after what you know, look for organic signals from the market before you actually start deploying real resources and real focus on going after them. And then what you're going to experience typically is that you're organically going to grow, build momentum, create wins because you're closing these smaller customers at higher frequency. You build some revenue, you mature your product, you build your team, you build more experience, more brand value in the market, and organically and beautifully, you're moving upstream and you're closing bigger and bigger customers. And once you close bigger customers, you might start hiring people that have experience in those verticals, in those markets, and they start selling even more of those. And slowly but surely, you hire some really big hitters, some whale hunters, some enterprise experts, and now you could cater the entire market. If that's really what you want, you might decide that you want to stick to one vertical, and that's beautiful. You might just want to sell to small businesses, a medium-sized or small and medium-sized SMB market, or just to professionals, or just to enterprise clients if that's the world you're coming from. But in B2B, size actually matters, not just in B2B. And you want to be cautious when you get started, not to take on board more than you can handle and not to try to close whales that could crush you, but actually start small, look for momentum, for unfair competitive advantage, and for signals from the market that they're actually ready to buy from you. And then, and only then, you go after them and you close more and more.